Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan. I'm Scott Schnarrs with Edan Gottlieb. And today we have a topic that I think everybody who likes money is really going to like. The topic of today is how do you figure out what you want to do for 2025? As people who know me know, I'm a big fan of goal setting. People that know Edan know that he's a big fan of goal setting. But it's not just to set the goals, it's what is the plan that you want to put in place in order to hit those goals. That's the really important part. And I think that there's a few things that we want to talk about there so that going into 2025, you can really hit the ground running. And I think what you'll find in this particular episode is that there will be a lot of action items for you to take advantage of. And I think that, we're recording this here on the first selling day of 2025. Come Monday, it's going to be time for everybody to shake off that holiday dust and to set themselves up for success for the year. So that's what we want to do. And I think part of setting yourself up is taking a little bit of reflection and thinking about what went well and what didn't go well in 2024. So Don, as you think about how you coach the team, what would you coach people on for looking at the past and kind of what they did right and what they didn't do so well, and how would they adjust that so that they can have the most successful 2025 possible?
Well, I think there are three dimensions you want to be looking at when you look at your past, right? Here's the numerical one. Look at all the data, look at all the stats, look at, what do the numbers tell you? But numbers alone are not sufficient, right? The context is important. I think the second part, you want to look at kind of the context in terms of your deals and really be honest with yourself and look at this stuff. This was good, this was bad. Judge yourself on kind of these results and try to be as honest as you can. And third, identify the gaps, right? Sometimes I like the exercise of think about this is your first day as a job, right? This is your first day as a sales guy or as a sales manager.
Great
at
advice.
this company. How would you go attack it? We come in with so much baggage at times into the new year that contaminate our decision process and kind of what are we looking at this, or give us excuses, or just look at it first. This is my first day as a job. How would I attack it? What would I do? And approach it with these fresh eyes. So if you kind of look at the numbers, judge yourself really harshly, and you could be in sales, we're probably our worst judges. Be true to that, identify, but then look at it as if I'm a new guy. But what would I do? What would I want to do? And I'll give you a simple example that happened multiple times. Know your ICP, or know your sellers, or know your buyers, or know really the persona and the person. After a couple of years, you're like, I know them pretty well. But if it was your first day, you would want to go and understand them better, or read about them, or look at some gong calls or discussions like that the other best sales rep, if you're the best, just to get a better understanding of them. Take that fresh mindset, because you get stale at really understanding them.
Yeah,
but it's just one example.
That's such an important thing, is to go back and take stock of what happened in the past. And I love the idea of sitting down and going, okay, this is my first day of work here. What do I want to do differently to make sure that I'm not falling into these traps and letting my skill set get stale? But how do you go and how do you make sure that you are having this, maybe honest reflection on your accountability to go, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, and this is what I dropped the ball on in 2024. So I do think it's important that you set these big goals for 25. To give yourself that North Star. And the North Star might not only be revenue, but it might be, what do you want to make from a W-2 standpoint? It might be, what are the metrics that you want to drive? What are the career milestones that you want to get? And laying the foundation for that so that you can start to define the difference between goals and systems. So when I think about that, I think about you create these SMART goals that are really well defined and very measurable versus these flexible goals that might be a little bit more amorphous out there. I think one of the things that I've always done, and working with my team when we think about going into a year, going into a quarter, even a month, is what are the gaps? And how do we identify what the gaps are for that? So if you look at your number, if you've got $1 million quota, you've got $400,000, $500,000 in your pipeline today, that's not going to get you to the $1 million. You probably need to have $3 or $4 million in your pipeline. So how are you going to build that to get another $2.5–3.5 million in pipeline on that $500,000 that you already have, and then start laying down the foundation for that? So when you've seen people do that, and we've worked with some great salespeople, you and I together, when you've seen the best people do that, what do they do when they look at the gap that they have in their number for the year?
So first thing is, I think you heard me say the same before, is you have to look at the things the way they really are. So really clean up and look at your pipeline. And the way I like to always say it is like, it is what it is. It's not worse than it is. So really, if you don't get the real understanding picture of it, you would never know what the gaps are. Now, the second thing is, how do you
do you find that salespeople lie to themselves?
Yeah.
Like I find that a lot of salespeople will lie to themselves about that, and they'll put rose-colored glasses on, and they'll think that things are going a lot better than they actually are.
This is the tricky part of you know, we have to be optimists because our lives are really, really hard.
Right.
But there's a difference between being an optimist and having to lie to yourself. It's sometimes like you can't, buy into your own BS kind of thing, or the hype that sometimes you're putting in there. And so optimism and always looking and believing there are no barriers and having motivation, great. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be looking at things the way they are. Again, as I said, they're not worse than they are. And what they are now is not the verdict of where they're going to be. This is the point of time. And you have to kind of make that sure that you make this distinction. It's okay to look at this as, I'm missing $1 million. And as a manager or as an individual rep, I'm missing $500,000 or $1 million of pipeline. Now, I'm very optimistic because I know I'm really good and I know I can make it happen and I can think about the ways to make it happen. But distinguish the two between I sit around and really look at the picture. It doesn't mean that this is where it's going to, this is not the verdict. This is not where it's going to get to. This is where it is right now. And it's an important skill that you have to build because it could be sometimes really, really depressing. And you're trying not to fall behind. I mean, we talked about looking and reflecting at the year. One thing I wanted to add to that is you'll get to the new year in one of three scenarios. Scenario one, you were the best last year. Scenario two, you just made the numbers. You were good. Scenario three, you didn't. And each of them have their own corrections they're trying to make. Like the you didn't is trying to say, hey, I can do it despite everything and try to pick them up. The guy that just made the number are either, I'm content or just like, how do I do better? And the best is really the ones that have to compete against themselves, which, by the way, should be the practice for the other two as well. They're just coming in from a different, point of view.
Yeah.
But so going back to that, be realistic about your numbers. Don't confuse being optimistic to looking at what it is right now is what I got. It doesn't mean that I can't make that happen from here. On the contrary, this is what we do. It's part of the magic of anybody in sales is that we can take that bleak current picture and take a lot of hard work and persistence and effort with optimism and great view of the world and make stuff happen.
And then, when we think about that, do you think about, like, I like to think, okay, I kind of hit it on it. And then once I figure out what that gap is, I like to break that down into both quarterly and monthly goals so that I have really clear objectives to go, okay, well, for Q1, if I've got $500,000 in pipeline, I probably need to get another $300,000 or $400,000 in there if I want to make the, $300,000 that I want. So I want to have 3X in there. I can break that down. And then for Q2, it's like, I've got $100,000 in the pipeline and I want to get to 400,000. So I need to generate another 1.2 million in pipeline in Q1 and so on and so forth. I find, at least personally, and I'd be keen to get your take on this, but I find that the shorter time frames help to keep people a lot more focused, right? So instead of just like kind of kicking the can down, like that'll come in at the end of the year, you can go look like by the end of January, I want to have, generated $200,000 in pipeline. And by the end of February, another 200. By the end of March, another 200. So that way I'm going into Q2, I probably have 900 or, even close to $1 million in pipeline in there so that I can spell it out that way. Because that makes it a lot more tangible and I know exactly what I'm doing every morning when I wake up.
And I've been debating with myself a lot about the timelines, right? Because some of these you say, hey, I got a 9 months sales cycle. How can I do a weekly target? I think my latest conclusion on it is that sales is, people say sales is a numbers game. I like to say it's a numbers game, but not just a numbers game. But there is a numbers game. So start with the numbers. And I think you do need to break it into quarterly, monthly, and sometimes even weekly plans. Now, the plans sometimes are not all result plans. If your results are, let's say a 9-month cycle or 6-month cycle, but there are progress elements. How do you know that you're making progress? Right? Pipeline is a good example. And but you can even break it down more into the numbers or the details. For me to get an opportunity, I need to talk to 3 people, or I need to break these things so you can get the indications of progress. The early indicators are important for you because if you're looking at longer cycles, then by the 9 months time frame that you'll figure out that you don't getting it, then that's it, you're done. Because it's a 9 months time frame. So break it into monthly. I would even go break it into weekly, which is harder to do.
Sure.
But go for these indications. How do I get the indication that I'm progressing, that I'm making progress?
And what are some of those indicators that you look at? Like I've got my own laundry list, but I'm keen to get your take on, when you think about those indicators on a weekly basis. So let's say you have a 12-month sales cycle, right? Which a lot of companies do now because it is getting harder and harder to sell software at least. When you get into a 6, 9, 12-month sales cycle, what are those weekly indicators that you think about?
So it goes back to you, and this you talk about if it's on the individual or the manager but it starts from your process, right? You've defined a sales process, and the sales process is supposed to give you this framework or a frame of how do we progress and see that we're making the right progress with our relationship with our customers. They go through their buying journey. How do we start the fact that they're interacting with us and we're exchanging ideas and we're identifying what the pain is and they agree that this is the one, and we know what's going to be the process to identify these people and how do we navigate to the company, who needs to be involved. All these pieces that you do the sales process, really sales process and methodologies like MedPick and others have been misunderstood, I would call it, in the last few years because they were abused as a tool to manage teams versus the tools to help you really track how well are you progressing. They're supposed to be the mirroring aspect of when a buyer or a company goes through their journey of buying. Yeah. What does it look like on our side? What do we need to do? And what needs to be verified that is happening to know that they're actually progressing towards a purchase and towards the purchase of my stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you got a 12-month or a 9-month cycle, you'll have to go, you manager, you individual contributor, you RevOps team, and truly give a level of details and specifications that is more broad than other cycles, because these are going to be your indicators. Am I making progress or not? This would also help, by the way, help you turn around and say, what am I going to do today? What am I going to do this week? Oh, I'm going to try to move the goalpost here that far because I know what needs to happen. These things needs to happen in order to get there.
So I think that that's another really good action item that if I were running a sales organization right now, that I would take and go, okay, like, is my sales process, like that I've defined it as the sales leader with my ops team and the rest of the staff, is it granular enough to show weekly or monthly progress on deal cycles that take 6, 9, 12 months to close, and really making sure that the reps know, hey, here's exactly what you should be doing at least once a week inside of this deal to make sure that it stays fresh.
Yep. And by the way, don't people misunderstood it towards micromanagement. This is not micromanagement. This is
not
enablement.
At all. This is a what?
Enablement. This is us doing the work and the hard work, thinking about what the journey looks like and what are the different pieces there. So you, sales team person, can go execute against it. You're an execution function. And so this is not about my micromanaging. And you'll get some salespeople that say, oh, I'm really good at what I do. I don't need all this stuff. I know it. Again, it's designed to help you. You don't want it. You don't have to use it. But here's the formula for success. Or you could do, guesswork.
I mean, I've never been to your house, so like I would like it if I was coming over to visit that I had a map to get there, right? Instead of just like driving over to the East Bay and knocking on random doors, saying, "Hey, does Don live here?" Like that's the whole purpose of that sales plan or that sales process. Is it helps you get to where you want to go in a much more efficient manner than just hoping you can knock on anybody's door.
And it doesn't take away from what you need from an account executive. The fact that you have it very well all mapped out doesn't mean that I don't need a person for it. Now I could, or a discussion about AI. I can just have an AI execute it. It's not about creating the tasks. It's about understanding what needs to happen for this to end up in a purchase and end up with a purchase of your stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that you and I were always very aligned on, and maybe you more so than I at Cloudinary, is risk mitigation.
Yes.
Right. So as you're going into the year, I think it's a really important thing that people look at. What are the biggest risks that they face? We're going into a new president coming in, so there's going to be things that pop up that might change the entire landscape of buying and selling software. You might be tired of your job. You might have burnout there. It feels like there's, hot new AI company launching every single day, so you're going to have competition in there. I think one of the things that's going to be so critical as you think about your 2025 plan is what is that contingency plan? And how do you make sure that you have the contingencies on what happens there, right? Hey, if this goes wrong, this is what I'm going to do, and then this is what I'm going to do, and then this is what I'm going to do. And I think the other thing is, like, how do you keep that really strong mindset? Because stuff does inevitably go wrong, right? You're going to have a deal go completely sideways. You're going to have a champion get fired. You're going to have, somebody come out of the woodwork and they're going to want to buy something different. Like, there's all kinds of problems in these deals. And I think it's so important that you maintain that positive mindset to be successful.
So I want to start in a more tactical way to address this. I think there's the macro way that, what happens with the software industry in general and in sales. But there's a tactical version, which is your step one, I think, which has two parts to it. One is kind of a framework of how to think about this, and think about it in terms of like, I got three components. I got stuff of, how do I get them, the market, into my pipeline? Right? How do I get to them? The inbound, outbound channels. That's one category. Second one is, how do I sell to them? And the third one is then, how do I get them to max value? Do I do land and expand? Do I just go for the land, the whole deal from the beginning? Or do I go and start small and then grow with them? And which means basically they understand it's going to be big. We're just going through a different. So you got these three categories. So kind of think about it this way. Now, tactically, start, as you pointed out at the beginning of the conversation, start with your pipeline. Clean your pipeline. And the way you clean your pipeline is step one, make sure you're in your winning zone or with your ICP or whatever methodology you picked up. Make sure that these are the opportunities. Step two, very tactical. Look at each one of the opportunities and can you answer the three basic whys? Why do anything? Why do it now? And why do it with us? This will give you the level of specificity you need about risk mitigation. If I can't answer all three, I got a higher risk. Now I need to think about better multiples. Or I think about path of how do I get them to why now or why me or things like that. So risk mitigation starts by very clean up pipeline and saying, I'm in my winning zones. I can answer the three whys. And if you really want to be pushing it over, try to even put them in the right forecast category. Not for your manager, no, for yourself. Look at this, and they're basically three, right? There's pipeline, upside, and commit. I usually use the fourth one, which is a cheat one. I call it forecast, although it's a forecast category. So, but basically, think about pipeline is these guys admitted they have the problem. All right, and then if I go to
they're at least curious about it.
Curious, but they have to admit they have it. I mean, they could be like, but this means I should play with it. They got the problem.
Yeah, the problem curious.
The upside says, you know what? There's a mutual understanding of what the action plan is or what we should go about doing it, and I can understand how they make a decision. Forecast means, we're engaged, we're working on this stuff. I know I can map up what the process is. I could even see how I can get to executives. I'm like, something is brewing really. That's why I added that forecast category, because it's like, it's in motions versus, commit that says, okay, they told me I'm winning. I met the executives. I'm going to go meet them. I know what the process is to get there. I'm 60 days out, 30 days, depends on my cycle.
Yeah.
But look at your pipeline, again, not for forecasting for your boss or your business, or just do this exercise of like where they're really at. Now you have a true picture. Now you can mitigate your risks because you know what they are. And if you see, they're all very weak on my whys and they're all early on, so maybe I need to compensate by doubling down on understanding the process. Later on, but missing one why, I need to go figure this stuff. But that's the tactical way of how do I fortify my performance. Clean pipeline.
Yeah, I think one of the consistent themes that we've talked about here is just being honest with yourself. Right, and I think that in my experience, as soon as salespeople are not honest with themselves, that's when everything goes sideways. Like they think that they have this deal, right? When these accounts are problem curious and people are like, oh no, that's a committed deal. There's such a huge disconnect, and I think you're right about like the three whys. I think when you can summarize that very clearly, and you're not lying to yourself about it, you've got a really good opportunity to do some good there.
And again, don't confuse saying, hey, I don't have the whys by being depressed. Oh, what am I going to do about it? I can have my own opinion. Maybe they don't have the whys and we can come up with a why. I can go ask for my buddies. I can figure this stuff. I go to my manager and say, we don't have a good why. Why did they pick us?
I also think and I do a lot of this, but I'm curious how much you do of it. How much personal goal setting do you do for yourself? Right, because I think that goes a long way from keeping people from burning out. Is you have to find that balance of like, I want to make myself better as a person in a family. I want to make myself better as a golfer. I want to make myself better as a whatever outside of the office, so that you're not completely tied to this work event.
Yeah, and I think this is super important, even more so for the profession of revenue and salespeople. Because again, we live in think about it. There's two very dominant components of our lives. One is that half of our income is dependent on performance, so we can't just cruise along. And we better, if we negotiate a better base and we don't really care, then we're probably in the wrong lane. So that's one. The other one is we live in a place that is very much of, we get a lot of rejections, a lot of problems, and it could be very discouraging. And staying motivated and focused and excited is super important. And so I think setting personal goals are important very much. But the tricky part about setting goals is, again, kind of like we talked earlier about your sales pipeline, and you want to break it into the quarterly, monthly, do the same thing with your personal goals, because otherwise you become something like, oh yeah, I want to learn a new language, and so I signed up to Duolingo or whatever I did, and that's it. No, you want to really put this just like you manage everything else. It is important, I think, to have goals that are outside your sales world. But I also think it's important. There's one of the books that I like to do these book clubs and stuff. So Arnold Schwarzenegger's recent book that he came out about Be Useful, one of the things he talks about is about setting goals. And he talks about when you set goals, you have to think big. And I think there's 3 components that he talked about. How do you think big? So first of all, don't want to play small. So everything that you do, and if it comes to, oh, this is great, but small, you shouldn't be picking it.
Yeah.
As you pick a goal. Be ambitious, and really anything that you think about and you say, there's some limitations, these are perceived limitations. So ignore them as you set those up. And so really push for something big, because you want that growth, you want that fulfillment. And if you're not going to pick something big, you won't be fulfilled. You won't get that excitement going on.
Yeah.
And again, salespeople, and people in the sales profession, around everything that they do, it's really important. So a long answer to your short question, yes.
Well, one of the things that I've always done, and you might remember when I was doing this at Cloudinary, was I always asked my team for goals, gaps, and motivators. Every quarter, every year, what are your goals, what are your gaps, and what are your motivators? And part of that is always your personal goals. And because I want to know, like, what are people striving for outside of the office, right? Not only does it help make a greater human connection, but if I can help them to go in that direction and hit their personal goals, whether that's, I want to buy a house, or I want to buy a new car, or I want to go on vacation, or want to save $1 million, whatever it might be. I find that when you share those publicly, it becomes a huge opportunity for people. It holds them accountable, and you as a leader can then hold them accountable as well.
I worked for the CFO, who is a very rich guy now, who was an investor in Silicon Valley, and the way, I really like the way he kind of outlines is, here's how people really, this is their sense of priority. Right. Number 1, themselves. Number 2, their family. Number 3, the company they work for. And the only reason the third one is there because it supports 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's a great way of looking at it.
And so you got to think about the same in the goal. For yourself, it's like, what do you want to achieve? The numbers, but elements is to support something different that you want to be. Now, one of the things you could do, I want to be the best sales guy. Right? I want to be the one doing the biggest deals. I want to be known for. That's a great thing, and don't downplay it, but you got to define what it is and what it is
you gotta make
for
it
you.
quantifiable.
But so definitely set goals, and it could be very much outside. You know that we know from experience, right? The more you have things going on as a salesperson, the richer your personality is, the better you can perform.
Yeah.
Because sales is, and especially where the world of sales is going, is about having a very rich sets of capabilities as an individual, as a human, that interact with other humans and get stuff done.
I'm a big believer in that, and I think a big contributing factor to Josh Schultz winning that huge deal with Bass Pro Shop was the fact that Josh hunts.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about instant credibility. Like when you walk in the door and Josh is like, oh, I've got that gun and this is where I went hunting and all of that. Like
Completely.
Boom, immediate credibility. So I think, being well-rounded is such a critical thing. So we're 25 minutes into this. I think that wraps up. There's a lot of action items here, but the first day of selling for 2025 is here. And I think that it's time to get a plan written down, shared with people, and start executing on it. And I think that this can be a year where everybody can go out and crush it. And we encourage you to do so. We like money here at Lunch Money, and we want you to be successful, and we hope you like money too.
Yeah, go out there. I think that's the best plan.